Hello! In tonight's video we are going to be talking about this. This is a 2-valve Dynasty 2 Soprano Bugle. In previous videos I have talked about how the bugles started off as an open length of tube that was used for military purposes, for signalling troops and so forth, and looked a little bit like this. However, in America they have an institute called the Drum and Bugle Corps. And they took these instruments, they took the drums, they took the bugles, and they made a competition out of them. They made an institution out of them where different drum and bugle corps would compete against each other and so forth. These groups were fraught with regulations. They had many different sorts of regulations, and so for many years bugles were just boring. They were similar to this in concept, a long length of metal twisted in around on itself. May not have looked specifically like this, but that's what it was for many years. Then they modernized just a little bit by adding the single valve bugle. This instrument is in the key of G, and it has a single valve here which is horizontal as opposed to the normal upright piston valves that we're used to, and that valve puts it into the key of D. By having those two valves you can suddenly play one, at least, scale. And so bugles looked like this for a long time. You had this, the soprano bugle, in G and D. And you had this, which was its big brother, an octave lower, or exactly twice the size, and it did the very same thing. It wasn't until much later that they decided what we really need is to look ridiculous, and so they added the second valve. There were some stages in between where they'd have one piston valve and a rotary valve and different things like this, but this here is an example of one of the later versions that they tried. You'll notice it looks very similar to a trumpet, apart from the obvious deformity that is the absence of a third valve. And indeed, if you were to compare this to a normal trumpet, it functions pretty much exactly the same, just without that third valve. This particular instance has lost its pinky grip, pinky ring, which is a little bit annoying, but otherwise is actually not in too bad condition. It obviously has had a bit of a hard life, as you would expect, but most of the metal is in reasonable condition. The valves click, particularly the first valve, which I need to take apart and fix. I think there's a bit of felt that's gone missing. Now, a couple of things to note. This is in the key of G, with two valves which put it into F, F sharp and E, if you want to call it that, but you just call it a 2-valve soprano bugle. It has the world's longest main tuning slide, which doesn't seem particularly long, but is a bit ridiculous. However, it's quite necessary because the instrument comes out of the factory ridiculously sharp, and you have to have it pulled out about 10 centimeters, or however many furlongs that is in the American system. But it has one rather unique feature which I thought was quite interesting. Now, we're used to trumpets that have little triggers that can push the tuning slide out, or little thumb hooks that you can adjust the tuning slide manually, but I've never seen an instrument that has a spring-loaded first valve trigger. Or it's not a trigger, it's just a finger loop, but the tuning slide stays out or in its flattened position, or you can sharpen it by pulling in the finger ring. Everything always is the opposite. Everything I've experienced, rather, is always the opposite. You push things out to flatten them, and you pull them in to sharpen them. This, it's out in its flat position naturally, and you pull it in to sharpen. It's the weird way around, and I don't know why they do that. And it is a bit weird, but it is what it is, and it's a little bit of niftiness that I thought I would mention. Now, this instrument, as I've said, has got two valves, is pretty obvious, but those two valves mean that we not only have one harmonic series, or two harmonic series, as we do have on the G and D bugle, we now have 4 harmonic series. we have all of those 4 harmonic series to play with at our disposal, and that means we can play a lot more notes. For instance, we can play some scales. And so forth. We've got a lot more available to us, but we still have the issues down low where we can't play chromatically. We still have some big gaps there. However, because the instrument is in the key of G, it is easier to play up high because it uses the trumpet mouthpiece, it uses the same bore as a trumpet, so it's actually relatively a lot simpler to play high notes. Top C, top D, all those notes above the stave come a lot more naturally on one of these. And so whilst this bugle has some real limitations, with 2 valves open to us, we can now play some actual meaningful music. Thanks for watching.